right. Well, welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for filminquiry.com, movieswithmark.com, and twincitiesgeek.com. So, been about a little bit over a month, but I've been very busy trying to catch up on every film from last year to make my best of the year list, as well as vote in a lot of the critics groups that I've been in. So, realizing that, I decided to use the stream to first adjust the microphone, but also to address like some of like the Oscar nominations that came out, as well as offer up my picks, not my predictions because it's a little tricky to predict, but very much like my picks of like what I consider to be the best from that year. But I'll also be doing reviews of the latest movies. So I've got reviews of Argylle, the latest Matthew Vaughn spy comedy, and I'll also be reviewing, coming out this weekend, is Lisa Frankenstein, the latest horror comedy written by Diablo Cody and directed by Zelda Williams. So we'll cover all that. Lisa Frankenstein is coming out just this weekend. The embargo dropped today, so it's an early review. Argylle came out last weekend, so I'm sure most people revealed the twists, but I'll try not to reveal much here in case there's anyone who still wants to see it for whatever reason. But yeah, if you like early reviews like this and you like to hear more movie talk on YouTube like this, be sure to subscribe and like this video if you want. Okay, so we will get straight into the reviews here. Let me get the cards up here and the notes. So we'll start off with the one that came out last weekend. Get up the notes here. Okay. And here we go with Argylle in 3, 2, 1. So Matthew Vaughn's Argylle is a surprisingly subdued Matthew Vaughn film, I guess. I don't know. After watching Matthew Vaughn's other like Kingsman movies, which were always, they were a little bit all over the place, but they were always like uproarious, and there was always like a few elements to them where I genuinely laughed and smiled at just like the boldness of the absurdity that was going on within, like mocking like the spy genre of films within Kingsman. So I was kind of looking forward to Argylle's, like maybe it's a different type of Matthew Vaughn that I'm seeing here in this type of film, but oddly enough, like I mean, like you look at like the central premise, it's about a writer who writes about spies and then gets thrown into a world of spies, very much romancing the stone type narrative. And I thought, okay, you know what? It's a standard type of, like I've seen this type of story before, but I'm sure like Matthew Vaughn could load it up with something unexpected, something fun, and something at least over the top, because he usually delivers on that type of stuff in his Kingsman movies. Not so much with Argylle. Maybe it's just like the PG-13 rating that he's trying to, keep everything, not as wild and crazy, but it just feels like it's missing something, like because there's elements on paper that are fun about it, but they don't pay off in an exciting way that you would hope for. Because like I like the central idea of the film. Bryce Dallas Howard plays Ellie Conway, a author of a series of spy novels in which she writes Agent Argylle, which in her mind is played by Henry Cavill, who works alongside John Cena. Now, you've probably seen because Henry Cavill's been like front and center on like all the marketing for this, but of course like the way that they've been trying to market this film is like a little bit of like a twisty mystery where they're not quite sure who the real Argylle is, because they established that, Henry Cavill is meant to be an imaginary Argylle. So, like, the big mystery is who is Agent Argylle, and they do reveal it in the film, and I'm not going to reveal it here in case anyone does want to see it, but suffice to say, and this is a big problem throughout the film, like, it kind of wastes Henry Cavill and John Cena at the same time. Like, they're mostly just there for, like, the expected action tropes. Like they're there to like just kind of like occupy space and just kind of like look kind of strong and, like as a predictable type of like action film and not used for much else. But this becomes like a common thing throughout the film. So Ellie is used to writing about spies, but she finds herself getting hung up on her latest novel, and then she's thrown into the world of spies when she comes into contact with Agent Aiden, who is played by Sam Rockwell. And I will say this: if you've watched a lot of films with Sam Rockwell and you're expecting him to do like a lot of dancing, you will get that in this film. But much like a lot of like the chases and the fight scenes, it kind of feels predictable in that sense, because like every time like Sam Rockwell shows up and he does like a little dance in his films, like not a like it just like every now and then he just like shows up and does a little bit of a dance. It's kind of fun. But here there's several dances, and he actually tries to work the dance routine into his action sequences, which is kind of fun. Like I said, on paper, this stuff sounds fun. It sounds exciting, and it sounds like the stuff that I'd like to see in a spy comedy. But it just like it keeps the problem is like it feels like this film is just throwing stuff at the wall because it doesn't build on anything. It feels like it's just twists, just to keep stuff like moving instead of like, building off stuff that came before, and just throwing wild stunts and action scenes at the wall that don't really catch you off guard as much, despite, like the change in scenery, the change in weapons, which are fine. Like that's I guess that's the way I describe most of the elements of this film. Is like they're okay, but they don't have that same punch that Matthew Vaughn's other films, like kind of like Kick-Ass and Kingsman and X-Men all have like those moments of like shock in there where I was expecting that. Like I was kind of just sitting there waiting for that moment to surprise. Like even with all like the twists that Aiden reveals, like with Sam Rockwell, because like Sam Rockwell shows up kind of looking like the dude from The Big Lebowski, and then changes his form later. And I expect like, okay, that's kind of a funny bit. Maybe he could change disguises more throughout the film, and he doesn't really do that. I kind of like the idea that Ellie has like the secret information that she doesn't realize is locked away in her mind that she can access about the spy world, which she kind of does for a few scenes, but then they forget about it and then find other stuff to do. And then they just kind of like fill in some of the blanks for comedy by throwing Ellie's cat into the mix, who you might have seen in the marketing for this film. The cat is along for the ride in this Argylle looking backpack, which I won't spoil much of like the other big twist of the film because there's a ton, but I guess I'll spoil this for anyone who's wondering. No, they don't kill the cat. The thing is, if they actually did kill the cat, it might be just a little bit exciting. Like I'm not trying to like encourage it, but it's like usually a pet in that scenario would only be dead in like a horror film, and within like a spy comedy, you kind of expect them to. You kind of expect them to survive, like especially a film that's trying to be like very very silly, and you want the characters to be likable. So yeah, like the cat's just there for funny reaction shots, and don't worry, the cat doesn't die in this film. But getting back to what I was saying about the cast being wasted here, because like you have a fairly stacked cast here. You have Bryan Cranston, who's playing this villain who like I was so mad about like how they used Bryan Cranston in this film, because they put him in like this mode of like shifting between being this kind of like wholesome dad and a sinister villain. So you've got like the aspects of like Malcolm in the Middle and Breaking Bad, and I love the way he shifts between them, but it doesn't really feel like we get a lot of that with him. Like we don't get a lot of scenes that go on long enough to have fun with Cranston, that it mostly just feels like he's a standard James Bond villain, like even with the twists and all. Catherine O'Hara shows up as Ellie's mother, and she has a big twist here, but it feels like she's only used for like one punchline of a gag, and it's kind of funny. I mean, they get a small amount of smiles out of me with it, but not a lot. I mentioned like Henry Cavill and John Cena are fairly wasted because they're mostly just like imaginary characters. Sophia Boutella shows up to like say some really like she occupies like one scene, and the same goes for Dua Lipa and Ariana DeBose. Both of them pretty much just occupy one scene in the film where it feels like, and it's not like one of those like a one scene like cameo type deal, kind of like Bullet Train. It's one of those things where it's like they're supposed to be like central characters and they're supposed to have a little bit of a twist to them, but they're only kind of there for like just a few minutes on screen, and then they're either forgotten about or they're kind of bookended for the rest of the film and not really used that much. And probably the biggest waste in this film, I think, is Samuel L. Jackson. Like, Samuel L. Jackson, they establish as this kind of like spy sage who does have like information regarding Ellie and like, you know, why this evil organization is after her for her secrets. And he spends most of the film, and I'm not exaggerating here, he spends the majority of the film just sitting back watching a Lakers game on television. That's the extent of it. Like he plays a key role in kind of like exposing this big spy organization that Ellie finds herself trying to unearth and like unleash this info into the public. And Samuel Jackson's character plays a part in that, but he's really just sitting back and watching basketball for most of the film. And it's just like, it's such a waste, because the film starts off with like really good energy in the first act. It's like, okay, it's trying, not everything is working here. Like, Ellie's moments of like writer's block and her imaginary spy elements are decent, and it's like, okay, you know, they're not great, but I'm sure like as the film goes on it might build on this, and it really doesn't. It just kind of just keeps throwing twist after twist after twist at the screen, to the point where it's like it feels like they're trying for absurdity, but like it's just not working. And I think one scene that encapsulates it best is there's a scene where Ellie is finally given like the big reveal of who Agent Argylle really is, and her reaction is just like anger and frustration, which is kind of like, she's like, that's it, that's the twist, and she's like, this is so stupid. And it's just like, it's one of those meta elements where they're kind of like commenting on how silly this is, and all the other characters are just kind of just going with it. They're just kind of like, well, that's the script we got, you know, just gotta roll with it, you know. And I wish I could like this film more, because like I said, the elements on paper here feel like they could work. Like, I mean, yeah, sure, the central story, basically romancing the stone, but, you know, like, you could still make that a fun film if you find exciting and kind of funny stuff to do along the way. And Vaughn is certainly trying with this film, but the more it goes on, the more it just keeps on feeling like it's spinning its wheels, trying to throw everything at the screen that it can, and it's just not sticking. It's like the few times that I did smile, it's kind of like a little bit off guard, and it's like a lot of stuff doesn't pay off as well as it should here. And I mean, it's like, this is a film that it's supposed to be absurd, and I'm kind of for it, because like, this is a film where it has a scene where Bryce Dallas Howard is skating on oil and slicing up henchmen, and just kind of like doing all these skater tricks, all these like ice skating moves on oil while she's shooting up all the goons. And it's like, yeah, it's a funny idea on paper, but there's not a lot that builds up to that moment. And the more that it just keeps going, it just feels like it's not going anywhere. And I think that the one scene that best describes just kind of like the lacking momentum of the script is there's a scene where Sam Rockwell and Bryce Dallas Howard are both fighting goons while they're in gas masks, and they're shooting at they're shooting at all the bad guys. They're throwing all these colorful smoke bombs around them, and there's this ridiculous romantic music playing. It's supposed to be very silly because they're doing dance moves while they're killing all these people, but they're not moving that much. They're mostly just stuck in this one spot, just kind of like pulling off these silly moves and killing all the bad guys around them without really going anywhere. They're just standing in place most of the time, just kind of doing their own thing right in this little center here and not moving outside of it. Because yeah, like the whole thing just feels like a very restrictive Matthew Vaughn film, and it's impossible not to compare to his Kingsman movies, not just because of like the association of the genre, but because this might be a bigger twist, but this film is meant to kind of sort of tie into Kingsman in some weird way. But by the time it gets to that point in the film where it's like this big, like, you know, mid credit reveal, I'm just kind of like, okay, whatever, I guess. And then like the other ridiculous reveal about the Argylle books and like a proposed series and like setting up a franchise, it feels like a mess by the end. Like they're just throwing out every idea that they can at the screen, seeing what sticks. And with Argylle, it mostly doesn't. It's just like it's a spy comedy that's so disappointing for all the lacking potential that it has. So yeah, Argylle, currently playing in theaters right now. Well, it's from Universal, so it's through like Apple, so it'll probably end up on Apple TV soon. Probably fairly soon. I don't think it's doing great at the box office, so make of that what you will. Okay, now we go from one comedy to another. There's a new one coming out this week, so let's bring up my notes here for Lisa Frankestein. Okay, make sure I got all the notes. Okay, and here we go. Let's get straight into Lisa Frankestein in 3, 2, 1. So, Lisa Frankestein is a teen horror comedy, which is set in the 1980s, and it's very much exaggerated, as you'd expect for being set during that decade. But this is a horror comedy that I feel like kind of works, mostly just because of its energy. Because like, I mean, like I was fascinated by, you know, who's making this film. You have Diablo Cody of Juno fame doing the screenplay, and you have direction by Zelda Williams, you know, a fresh director here. And I was very much looking forward to this film. Just so I like the idea of the concept. I like the style that they're kind of going for with it. And for the most part, I feel like it really delivered on the absurdity that it was trying to go for. And I think that's just because it has a lot of faith in being ridiculously cheesy. Like, it does, like, I mean, like, yeah, it's meant to be set during the 1980s, and it's got, like, you know, like the neon lighting and the throwback, you know, hairstyles and fashions of the era, and, you know, the accompanying soundtrack, all that stuff, you know, the standard, like, Stranger Things treatment. But it also has that tone and that, you know, like that kind of like, almost kind of like a, I don't quite want to say like Tim Burton, but definitely like that cheesy 1980s horror style where characters always feel just at least a little bit cartoonish here and there in the way that they're used. So the central character is Lisa, played by Catherine Newton. And she's like an outsider, basically like an outsider of her high school. You know, she likes to hang out around graveyards. She likes to, she likes to read and, like indulge in poems, and she's fascinated by, horror stuff and old movies. She just, she loves all that stuff. And they establish her as someone, who's kind of, she's having a rough time. She's endured a trauma of having her mother being murdered, and then her father, played by Joe Trest. I think that's how it's spelled. Joe Trest, who is just kind of like a lovable but pushover dad with the big glasses, who marries quickly to Carla Giucchino, who is just this, like the worst stepmother, just like the worst mother that you could expect for Lisa to have. Like she's, she works in a psychiatric clinic, but she's very much into self-help. She's got a big ego, and she just wants to dominate all of Lisa's life and just steps over her father to kind of like discipline her in any way that she can. So Lisa's not having a good time. But she's, she's got, she's got a new sister because of this marriage, and her sister takes her out to, have a party, even though that party doesn't go well. In fact, it goes horribly when like she goes like, oh, I'll take Lisa out, it'll be nice for her, she'll get to meet some guys, have some fun, but she ends up getting drugged at the party and almost getting raped. So not fun. But thankfully, like her dreams do come true. Where she's obsessing with this one gravestone of this forgotten soul, and she feels like, oh, I connect so much more with the dead. And then, as luck would have it, one dead guy rises from the grave on one stormy night, played by Cole Sprouse. And although this guy can't really talk and he's got decayed flesh, Lisa relates to him, and it's basically like kind of like hiding a monster in her closet type deal. So she finds herself fascinated by this guy. It's kind of like an ET scenario where she's like, introducing him back into the modern world and trying to relate to him, even though he can't really talk back. But the funny thing too is that she discovers that if she can get more new body parts for this corpse, he can start to become more alive, and almost more like magically alive. Because I love how they set this up, because like the whole way that she's able to kind of bring him more back to life is through like a malfunctioning tanning bed. So every time that she finds like a new body part, she attaches it to him, and then she throws him in the tanning bed, and he just magically comes out less decayed and more human and closer to like the boyfriend that she's always wanted. Like, there is another boy in the film who that she is lusting after, but ultimately she kind of comes to realize that no, it's this Frankenstein's monster type deal that I'm more attracted to, especially when he becomes more attractive as the film goes on. Like, he shows off, like, once he gets like better use of his hands, he shows off that he can play piano beautifully, so they have like a funny little duet. Well, not really duet, like he plays and she sings. Lisa sings horribly, which I might add is hilarious. That's perfect. And the funny thing too is like the more that that Lisa's Frankenstein monster kind of becomes more human, Lisa becomes more confident in herself to kind of like embrace more of like the goth look. Like she starts dressing more in black. She becomes a little bit more braver and more cynical and more open. And it's mostly because she's murdering people to get more body parts for Frankenstein. Like she lures like the guy who raped her, of course, out, and she takes a specific body part. And as you might expect, because this film is meant to be ridiculous and absurd, you can see where this is going. Like, she keeps getting more and more body parts, and at one point, she is going to get a genital. A genital does come into the equation, and it's over the top. I'll just say that. Like, the way that she acquires it is very ridiculous, and I don't want to spoil it here just because it's so absolutely ridiculous for how it's revealed here. And aside from just like the violent vulgarity of it all, and just like the weird throwback style here, just like the script is just loaded with funny lines. Just like, and I think like they're funny lines, but like I think it requires like a perfect cast to deliver them beautifully. Like Lisa's sister Taffy, played by Lisa Sobrano. She delivers her lines perfectly, because like she's meant to be like she's trying to be like a supportive sister, but she always says like the wrong things. Like at one point, she's worried that their mom has gone missing. And Taffy just says to Lisa, what do you have to worry about? Your mom's already dead. But she, and it's an insulting line, but she says it like it's the most matter of fact thing, and acts like it doesn't offend anybody. Which just makes it so much more ridiculous. There's also like a few like in jokes here and there. Like at one point there's a Rocky Horror joke that's just kind of like casually tossed in there. Like, it's not they don't draw to it as much. There's a few other more blatant references, like Trip to the Moon is referenced a few times very blatantly in like a number of scenes. So they showcase that Lisa's like a big fan of old movies. Even dropping like some silent movie directors at one point in the film. So they do go the extra mile to make her that kind of like geeky type of girl. And I think the whole film is like ridiculous, but I think it's ridiculous enough where it still has like some heart to it. Like because like my one worry about the film was about like halfway through, like I'm having a great time. It's uproarious. It's like the story's building. You know, there's some character, there's some heart to it. But I got worried that it's just gonna keep trying to be more ridiculous and more over the top. That it's just it's not going to hit as well when it gets to that finale. But I think what makes the film work is that it maintains the absurdity by still making Lisa's story genuine. Like they don't throw in like some last minute bizarre twist that doesn't make like this romance between this dead guy not culminate. Like it does have a fairly satisfying ending to it that feels, you know, like it feels suitable for like a romantic film and also for like a monster movie. And I think there's a decent balance there of trying to make this like a cheesy 1980s horror film, but also a teen rom-com with horror elements to it. And it mostly works, but I do have preferences because like I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who do not like this film simply because it does feel all over the place. And if you're not in that kind of B-movie cheesy acting vibe, this might not gel with you. Like if you're not willing to go along with the over-the-top nature of this film, you're probably not going to be on board because it does kind of get all over the place and get a little bit messy in its narrative here and there. But what makes that work is just like the energy of all the actors, just like the ridiculous script by Diablo Cody, and just like the general energy that all the actors bring to this. I couldn't stop laughing at this film. There's so many moments where I was just genuinely smiling and laughing and just loving how ridiculous this film went and how far it goes with it. And yes, if you are expecting Lisa to have sex with the monster, don't worry. They make sure that this is a horny Frankenstein film. And not in like the way of like because I said this about Poor Things from last year, that Poor Things is very much a horny Frankenstein movie. This is closer to that. This does feel more like, you know, what if Frankenstein wanted to, you know, screw his monster. But you frame it as like as a teen rom-com and you make it kind of like sweet while still making it a bit vulgar and cynical here and there. And for the most part, I really enjoyed this film. I was laughing so hard at most of the time. I loved its spirit. I loved that how it didn't relent on its energy. It felt like I said, I was a little bit worried in the second act, but then the third act started up and it kept building on what it had, and it became more interesting and fascinating and more fun as it went into that third act. Which I think is especially for like a concept like this, you really need to be able to sustain it the more that it goes along. And in that kind of like cheesy 1980s B-movie horror, teen comedy type vibe, I feel like for smushing all that together, it really works here. Like, I really think that Zelda Williams knocked it out of the park here. It helped out a lot by Cody's script, which is just is like fairly sharp, but not afraid to have a lot of fun with this material. And yeah, I actually really love Lisa Frankenstein, this teen horny monster movie. So yeah, Lisa Frankenstein will be playing in theaters this weekend. So be sure to check that out. So see, it's not all bad. Like, yeah, like we suffered through Argylle, but then we got Lisa Frankenstein. And to tell the truth, I'd actually been waiting a long time to talk about this film because we actually got a surprisingly early screener of Lisa Frankenstein, and just because there just wasn't a whole lot playing in January, that we got like a very, very early screening that I think I saw like 2 or 3 weeks ago, because like the embargo just dropped today, but I've been thinking a lot about this film, and it's a lot of fun. I can't wait to go see it. I feel like very much so that it's going to be for some people, it's going to be in the same vein of like Renfield, where it's like it's a horror comedy. It's playing around with like the Universal monsters, but doing so in a fairly compelling way, where it's exploring more than just the usual type of creature feature type deal. Okay. Whew. Well, blew through that. I got a lot of energy. All right, so we will get to Oscar picks here. Just one moment here. I threw my voice out a little bit while I was bragging about Lisa Frankenstein. Just give me one moment here. Okay. Yeah. All right. Are we ready? Oh, hang on. I forgot to grab one thing here. Okay. Sorry, I just forgot to bring up the notes here. What I was gonna mention for most of the winners, because I do have most of them memorized. It's just I'm trying to like refresh my memory here. Okay. So here we go. All right. Well, the Oscars. See, I knew I had to work on my voice. Just a moment. So the Academy Awards are coming up on March 10th, and the nominations are out. So I thought I'd use this time to talk about my picks for what I feel are the best of the Oscar nominations here. And unlike some of the voters or some of the other people who might want to weigh in on this topic, I actually have seen all the films that are nominated, with the exception of the short films for short documentary, short live action, and short animation. I have seen most of them. I've seen quite a fair number of them, but not enough where I feel like I could make a concise recommendation for what I feel is the best film in that category. That being said, for all the bigger categories, I have seen all the films, and I would like to voice what I feel are the best picks for those nominations. So let's start it off here with Best Visual Effects, and the nominations are The Creator, Godzilla -1, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, and Napoleon. Now, among all these, I know like a lot of people are kind of pulling for Godzilla -1, which I have to admit, like, you know, these are all fairly strong nominations, and Godzilla -1 for especially like for the budget they had and for like kind of like sneaking in December, it very much surprised me. Like I love the way that it looks, and you know, when Godzilla kind of like, you know, and this is true of every Godzilla film for me, when Godzilla powers up for his atomic breath and you see him light up and he's powering up and he's about to shoot that energy, that always gives me goosebumps. And Godzilla -1 did a fantastic job on building up the threat of Godzilla. But with all the nominations considered, honestly, I kind of have to go with The Creator. And it's mostly just because I like the way that, because like the biggest thing that a lot of people are talking about with The Creator is that it was shot on like a small budget. Now, when I say small budget, I mean $80 million. I think it was like roughly $80 million, something like that. It was definitely under $100 million. But A key aspect of those visual effects is that a lot of them were shot on location. I believe in Thailand, and just like the way that they're integrated into like a natural environment and creating this kind of like believable, kind of like dystopian environment where like these AI androids try to live among humans. I felt did a really good job integrating that, especially for like and you think about like like a film with like AI and robots. You don't typically like my mind immediately goes stuff like like Blade Runner, where it's in like this like cold dystopia of skyscrapers and stuff like that. And but with the creator, like a lot of the film is it takes place like outside and like these like vast like mountains, and like you get to see like all like the natural environment, and it's just it just embraces a lot of the beauty and just puts in the CGI on top of it, and as a result it actually kind of feels more natural. Like the more that you look at it, like there's rarely a moment, like even though it's like there's some clear moments where they have like all CGI robots that kind of occupy the screen, and you can tell like they're CGI, but they're, I think in terms of the way that they're composited into the film within the natural environments, it looks beautiful. So yeah, like my top pick is The Creator for best visual effects. One moment here. Sorry about that. I had a little bit of an issue over there. So yeah, all sorry about that. I had the cat in the background there. So with best visual effects, like all things considered, I think the creator did a great job of implementing these visual effects into a natural environment. So yeah, my pick for best visual effects is the creator. Okay, next up is best sound, and the excuse me there. All right, next up is best sound, and the nominations are The Creator, Maestro, Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1, Oppenheimer, and The Zone of Interest. Now, in terms of, this was, I was going back and forth on this about which nomination that I felt was like the best here, because they're all fairly strong. Like the creator in terms of how it meshed, like the mechanical into natural environments, like the aspects of Maestro and like Mission Impossible with the stunts, and Oppenheimer with all like the sound that they used for implementing, like how like the science was happening in the development of this weapon and the zone of interest. But all things considered, I feel like the zone of interest is my pick. And I think a lot of that goes to the fact that the sound is almost like another character in that film. Because you have these elements of the Holocaust that are right next door, and the only visible aspect of this horrible atrocity of history is within the sound itself. So you hear like some like screaming, like shouting of the guards, screaming of the prisoners, gunshots, and just the horrific sounds going on just next door to like this fairly nice looking family home, where the family doesn't take that much heed of all the horrors that are going on just like a few feet away from them. Yeah, I get, with all things considered, Zone of Interest is my pick for best sound. Okay, now let's get to best, I'm sure a lot of people have opinions on this one, best song. Okay, so the nominations for best song are The Fire Inside from Flamin' Hot, I'm Just Ken from Barbie, It Never Went Away from American Symphony, Wasase from Killers of the Flower Moon. I'm probably butchering that title, by the way. I know it's meant to translate to something else. I just didn't put it in there. And What Was I Made For from Barbie. Now, I went back and forth on this for a bit because I think, like, you know, with Barbie having two nominations, I feel it's pretty obvious that Barbie's going to win here. So it's ultimately, you know, a question of, you know, which song is more memorable. And even, like, outside of, like, all the Barbie mania, I still feel like I'm Just Ken is the best song here. Like, it's the one song from Barbie that I can't get out of my head. It's the most memorable. It has the best sequence. It's, you know, it's a very fun song too, that you just can't stop. At least I can't stop thinking about it. So I think it's pretty obvious that I'm Just Ken is the best song. So yeah, my pick for the best song is I'm Just Ken from Barbie. Okay, next up is production design, and the nominations for production design are Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, Napoleon, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. Fairly tough category, just because, like, every single one of these films embodies, like, a different type of world here that doesn't feel like it's just kind of, like, redundant. You know, I was going back and forth about, you know, which film I wanted to win more, like, because, like, Barbie obviously had a lot of work put into it, but Poor Things as well. It's mostly just because I love the way that they're trying to establish worlds that feel real, but still fantastical at the same time. And I think with all those aspects considered, Poor Things has my vote in terms of production design, because just, like, the ability for that film to kind of, like, embrace a believable, like, throwback Europe, but still still look, like, wild and imaginary, and have this element where it still feels a bit grounded, I feel really works to the benefit of that film. That it's just it's beautiful to just kind of get, like, lost in that world too, because, like, it's supposed to be a world that does have horrors in it and, like, relatable aspects that you would expect from that type of era, but still given this a little bit of a fantastical glaze, that it very much becomes an intoxicating film. So yeah, for production design, my pick is Poor Things. Next up is Best Music, and the nominations for that are American Fiction, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. You know, for as much as I like Poor Things, because, like, it's a very bizarre score. Like, it's always meant to put you a little bit on edge, because it always feels like it's off key. That I kind of like that aspect of it. But in terms of just genuinely powerful music, you can't beat Oppenheimer. Like, the score for Oppenheimer is just so intoxicating, and, you know, like a lot of Christopher Nolan films, it's like it's music that deeply engrosses you within that world. And like Nolan always has this great way of just, you know, choosing just the right composers to kind of, like, make these aspects of, like, these epic aspects of the narrative come out within his music, and just, I mean, within the scores of his films. But yeah, I mean, Oppenheimer, I can't stop thinking about that score too, just because, like, it's just so beautiful, and it's so beautiful and tragic at the same time, that I just couldn't stop thinking about it. So yeah, Oppenheimer is my pick for best score. Next up is Best Makeup and Hair, and the nominations are Golda, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and Society of the Snow. And among all of them, I think the clear choice here for me is Poor Things, and it's mostly just because not just because of because of Willem Dafoe's makeup here of trying to transform him into like this disfigured mad scientist, but just everything that went into like forming the weirdness of this film. Like aside just from how Dafoe is depicted, just like the other way that the characters are meant to depict this dapper aspect of society, like not to mention like the way that Emma Stone has like this very very long hair throughout the film, and just like the way that Mark Ruffalo looks, and like the other characters they encounter who shift between being both like upper class and very clean cut while also still looking disgusting and being capable of just like these gross aspects, like especially like in the opening scenes where like Emma Stone is not entirely in control of her bodily functions and she becomes a bit disgusting here and there. I think like a lot of credit goes into Poor Things for kind of making that world and the weirdness come alive. So yeah, my pick for best makeup and hair is Poor Things. All right. And now, let's get to Best International Film. And the nominations for that category are Il Capitino, Perfect Days, Society of the Snow, The Teacher's Lounge, and The Zone of Interest. Now, I'm a little bit torn on this category because, like, for as much as I love The Zone of Interest, and I do feel like that film, just because like The Zone of Interest already has like a lot of nominations, it's probably going to win in this category. But my personal pick for this nomination, only because like I know Zone of Interest is probably going to win a lot of other stuff, is Perfect Days. Perfect Days, I feel, is just like, it's one of those films that just like I'm not going to stop thinking about for days. Part of the pun here, if that is a pun. But yeah, like Wim Wenders' film about like this sympathetic toilet cleaner. It's just it's fascinating. It's beautiful. It's slow paced, but it has like a lot of humanity to it. That when I first saw the film, like I really really liked it. Like it just barely got in on my top 10 list. But the more when I first saw it, like, okay, this is a pretty good film for Wim Wenders. But the more that time passed, the more I kept thinking about the film, and the more I loved it more and more. And yeah, it's such a wonderful, slow paced but meaningful and sweet film that my pick for Best International Film is Perfect Days. So yeah, if you have not seen Perfect Days, and I know like a lot of people are seeing Zone of Interest right now, be sure to check out Perfect Days, because that is my pick for Best International Film. And now let's get to Best Editing, and the nominations in that category are Anatomy of a Fall, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. Okay, so you have a Christopher Nolan film and a Martin Scorsese film. Both of these films, like they run a little bit over, they run over 3 hours, and they have to be expertly edited to maintain your attention. And usually they always are. Like Nolan's films are always well edited, and Scorsese's films are always kind of feel like a masterclass in editing, just for how they keep up the pacing so quickly. So they're kind of like neck and neck for me. But with all things considered, like just beating it by like a hair for me is Oppenheimer, just because of the ground that's covered in Oppenheimer and like the different events that it's meant to cover, as well as the events that are meant to kind of overlap with each other, like the scenes where Oppenheimer is being congratulated for the bomb while witnessing death and destruction around him amid the celebration, and then of course the other memorable scene where he's being interrogated about his love affairs, and then you see like you see that sexual affair kind of like invade the mind of everyone who's watching him in that moment. It's just beautifully assembled, and to sell that that the major developments of this film, and to keep you interested for like, a film that has like a lot of courtroom hearings and interrogations, in addition to scientific research. I feel like you need to have that film expertly edited to make it work. And it works so damn well in Oppenheimer that I have to give it up for Oppenheimer. That's my pick for best editing. Now let's move on to let's clear my throat here for a minute. Now let's move on to best documentary. And the nominations are Bobby Wine, The People's President, The Eternal Memory, Four Daughters, To Kill a Tiger, and 20 Days in Mariupol. And I think for me, like this was like a little bit of an easy pick here. For me at least, the obvious winner is 20 Days in Mariupol. Mostly because like it's a documentary about covering, the death and destruction in Ukraine from people who were on the ground while Russian troops were advancing, and the journalists behind this were putting themselves at huge risks with like tanks aiming at them, and they were just like a few feet away from like soldiers who could gun them down, and they just were barely able to escape with this footage. And just like and there's several moments where like you're witnessing, the people filming this were mostly filming people in hospitals, filming people in hospitals who were tended to the wounded from all these attacks. And there's you can feel like the despair in the air, but at the same time, when some of the doctors and nurses realize that they're being filmed for this documentary, they quickly point out, be sure to film this. Look at this. Like, this is the horror that's going on in Ukraine right now. Be sure to get this if you can. And thankfully, like, from the sounds of it, like the filmmakers just barely got out with this material, and just like the way that it's shot and the way that like it was, and especially like this was an area where they couldn't like easily like upload stuff to the cloud quickly. There were a few moments where they could, and they had to use them sparingly in order to get that footage out to the public. And it's just like, it's a testament to how important that type of journalism and filmmaking is to the world in that moment. That, yeah, it's a no-brainer for me on this. Like, best documentary is easily 20 Days in Mariupol. And now, much less depressing, let's get on to and now time for best costume design. And the nominations are Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, Napoleon, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. Now, I was a tad bit torn between Barbie and Poor Things just because they both have very elaborate costumes that kind of like stick out in these types of narratives. But I mean, for me at least, like the way that like the costumes in Poor Things were assembled were just wonderfully absurd, and surprisingly fitting for like the type of era that they were going for with that film. That I feel like Poor Things really worked for me. Like Barbie has a lot going for it, but Barbie also had like a bigger template to work with. It was most like they had like a framework of just trying to like replicate all of Barbie's costumes, which they did like quite beautifully. Like I love the way they just like outright draw attention to them throughout the course of the film. But just like the absurdity that was placed in like some of the costuming, especially with Emma Stone's very like big shoulder dresses in Poor Things, just really attracted my eye a lot more. So yeah, in terms of best costuming, my choice is Poor Things. And now and now the nominations for best cinematography. And the nominations are El Conde, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. And I mean, again, much like best editing, you have a Nolan film, you have a Scorsese film, and those are just amazing to look at the way that they're assembled here. And I know that like there's a lot of excitement for Oppenheimer, and it is beautifully shot. I love the way that a lot of the scenes are set up with just not just showcasing like the vastness of the experiment, but especially like the adherence to close-ups. I love how uncomfortably close that film gets at times to its subjects, to kind of like almost like bore straight into their head. But again, much like with like best editing, Scorsese, I mean, kind of the inverse of best editing here, because Scorsese kind of like inches out Oppenheimer for me in this category, just because I love the way that Scorsese frames a lot of this this Midwest territory here, and especially the way that he kind of uses it to kind of like signal different aspects in the story. Like at one point, like I love where Leonardo DiCaprio is kind of like looking out over this field that's set aflame, and it's so perfectly like it's thematically appropriate and symbolically perfect of showcasing how like this is the hell that he has built for himself. Not to mention like a lot of the wide shots are just absolutely gorgeous in Killers of the Flower Moon. You really get to see like kind of like take in like the land and, you know, how it's being cultivated, and like, you know, kind of taking in almost kind of like the eye of Willie King Hale in this, by, you know, like looking at all that potential there. Even though like Hale's, you know, the way that Hale looks at it is just like he wants to exploit everything here. That, yeah, it's gorgeously shot that, you know, like an evil person will look at that and say, yeah, we got to rip all that out. We got to destroy all this. Because there are like some genuinely like gorgeous shots in there, and just like the way everything is framed, especially, you know, like the scene, like there's a big explosion at one point, the scenes of execution where you get to take in all the environment. It's a film that very much lets you into that world, and Scorsese is usually really good about framing his films that way, that it feels like you're right there within that community, and you get to explore every tiny little aspect of it, while still getting like a vast, you know, like a vast like idea of where everything is in this narrative. Like even like the little elements, like where there's a car race through town, when Leonardo DiCaprio's character first meets Robert De Niro, when you get like that gorgeous like drone shot, like that's just beautiful stuff. Absolutely beautiful. So yeah, like my choice for best cinematography is Killers of the Flower Moon. And now let's go over the nominations for best animated film. And the nominations are The Boy and the Heron, Elemental, Nimona, Robot Dreams, and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Really good selection this year. I'm really pleased with pretty much all these nominations here. And I'm a bit torn between The Boy and the Heron and Across the Spider-Verse, because I felt like both films were not just like gorgeous to look at. They are. I mean, like, you know, Hayao Miyazaki's traditional animation is always a sight to behold, and you know, he proves it here again as well. But Across the Spider-Verse is also very experimental, very inventive, and is willing to try out different mediums and merge them in a very like creative way that like a lot of CGI animated films are just not doing these days. But you know, thinking about both films, ultimately I came down to Spider-Verse. I think that Across the Spider-Verse is just like an amazingly assembled animated film, not just for like the juggling of mediums, but also for its thematic elements about wanting to break canon and do your own thing, and kind of like, you know, not be bound by, you know, whatever like Destiny or comic books tell you to do. Like, you know, basically forging your own path, which, you know, saying that, The Boy and the Heron does have a lot of those similar elements as well, in terms of, you know, not being afraid to like let the castle go down and not just, you know, be bound to that legacy, you know, to build something up, you know, to build yourself as something more than just, you know, being like a continuation of something else. And the only reason that I kind of favored Spider-Verse a little bit more than The Boy and the Heron is only because like I've seen Miyazaki do this type of story before, not quite exactly, but to like a similar degree, where I feel like it's almost kind of like better showcased in some of his other films. It is still a gorgeous and fascinating film, and I absolutely loved it. I actually kind of do love how The Boy and the Heron is a little bit more abstract than a lot of his other Studio Ghibli films. But when push comes to shove, Spider-Verse was ultimately the film that I kept thinking about, just because like it experimented. It was trying a lot of stuff that I hadn't seen before, and even though it carries like a similar thematic message, similar to The Boy and the Heron, it weaves it kind of like a little bit more like exciting and inspiring, I think, to me, just a bit more than The Boy and the Heron. So yeah, my choice for best animated film is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. And now the nominations for best original screenplay. And the nominations are Anatomy of a Fall, The Holdovers, Maestro, May December, and Past Lives. Okay, so really, really good lineup here. I was debating this so much. This is really tough, just because, like, I love the way that Anatomy of a Fall is a courtroom drama and murder mystery that does not give you a clear answer. I love that aspect of it. I love that Past Lives addresses this aspect of realizing that, you know, the person you used to be is gone, and that you're never going to be able to go back to that. And while it's a part of like accepting life, it's also a really sad element as well. And that sadness comes about in this very internal and almost cerebral way that I really loved how it was evoked in that film. But The Holdovers, just for me at least, The Holdovers just has like a very crisp dialogue that it worked so well for me that I kind of got to go with The Holdovers, just because I think like it builds up the characters well enough. Like their dialogue feels, it feels fairly natural, and a lot of that, of course, comes down to the actors here, who are all excellent in these roles. But yeah, like it you know, like a good screenplay is only good as the actors you have for it, and they do a great job here as well. So it's a little bit of a close call for me, but ultimately my pick for the best original screenplay among all these nominations is The Holdovers. Although, like, I'm kind of like neck and neck between that and Anatomy of a Fall and Past Lives. Those are also fantastic screenplays as well. And now it's time for Best Adapted Screenplay. And the nominations are American Fiction, Barbie, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and The Zone of Interest. Again, another very, very, very tough one here. And even now, when I'm looking at like the nominations, I'm still kind of like going back and forth in my head a little bit about which one I want to choose. But I think in terms of like knowing the source material a little bit here, I kind of got to go with Poor Things, just because I think like Poor Things, like it makes a big change, a fairly big change from the original novel here, but it just like the way that it proceeds and what it wants to showcase, and more importantly the philosophy and what it wants to be about, just it worked so well for me in that film. And it's just like there's very very, very poignant dialogue within there, but also just like loaded with absurd lines that, you know, again, much like with, you know, the original screenplay, you need a good cast for that. Poor Things has a great cast, and they make this script with such absurd lines as, like, you know, I excuse me, I must go slap that baby, or something to that effect that Emma Stone has to say. Just wonderfully ridiculous lines like that, and the, you know, being able to state those in earnest within the script, that you have faith in the audience to recognize the absurdity. It's just such a fascinating screenplay to me. So yeah, my pick for Best Adapted Screenplay is Poor Things. And now we're on to Best Director. That's right, I'm going there right now. So the nominations for Best Director are Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall, Martin Scorsese for Killers of the Flower Moon, Christopher Nolan for Oppenheimer, Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things, and Jonathan Glazer for The Zone of Interest. And I know, like, with all the momentum that's been built up for Oppenheimer, I'm pretty sure that Christopher Nolan is going to win this, win the Academy Award for Best Director here. But ultimately, I'm kind of like, and it's mostly just because it's my favorite film of last year, but I kind of got to gravitate towards Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things. I think, you know, for the material that he covers within that film, I feel like you need to be like very bold and like very confident in your direction to kind of like make this film that contains just so much absurdity, but also these very like astute observations on like sexuality, and philosophy and capitalism. I feel like you really gotta have like a lot of boldness to make that type of film work and direct it in a way where where like people will be able to perfectly read the absurdity and the jokes, as well as like take in the horror when it's meant to be witnessed. And with all that considered, Poor Things is my choice for best director, even though I'm pretty sure Christopher Nolan is going to win for Oppenheimer. Which I can't be too mad. Like, Oppenheimer is a very, very well directed film. So yeah, but personally, my pick and my choice is Yorgos Lanthimos. And now it's time for Best Supporting Actress. And the nominations are Emily Blunt for Oppenheimer, Danielle Brooks for The Color Purple, America Ferrera for Barbie, Jodie Foster for Niad, and Davine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers. Now for me, this is kind of an easy one for me. Like, Davine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers just did it for me. Like, the way that she's able to just kind of like shift between being this very caring person, but also this very cynical person who just kind of rolls her eyes at people, in this very believable manner for like this woman who has endured the loss of her son. I think like it's a very delicate balancing act to make this like a very likable character who never feels like she's just playing at one tone. And especially when you get to like the Christmas party sequence where she goes from just kind of like being like a, you know, feeling a little bit out of place at this party to getting hammered and just like angry and sad about the past in a very believable way for someone who's kind of like gone through all that. I think it was just an amazing performance from her, especially the moment where she goes to visit family and there's one scene that's perfectly set up without like a speck of dialogue that just has her kind of make the decision of letting go of her son's past by just like, you know, relinquishing, you know, like all these like, you know, mementos, like, you know, from her son's childhood. And it's sad and it's tragic and it's beautifully showcased without like a line of dialogue, and Randolph just knocks it out of the park. So yeah, among all the nominations for Best Supporting Actress, my pick is Davine Joy Randolph. And she probably will win too. Like, she's been having a lot of momentum for her, so here's hoping. And now it's time for Best Supporting Actor, and the nominations in that category are Sterling K. Brown for American Fiction, Robert De Niro for Killers of the Flower Moon, Robert Downey Jr. for Oppenheimer, Ryan Gosling for Barbie, and Mark Ruffalo for Poor Things. This is probably the toughest category, at least for myself, to pick from, because everyone here is so damn good, that it's just it's tough. It's really tough because like everyone here is bringing like their A game. Like, Sterling K. Brown brings a lot of energy. Robert De Niro is at his most sinister. Robert Downey Jr. just dominates the screen for like, you know, his plot within Oppenheimer. Ryan Gosling just is having too much fun playing Barbie, and Mark Ruffalo is just throwing himself into humility in Poor Things. And it's so close. It's so, even though I kind of have it in my head which one I want to win, I I'm still going back and forth with this, but I'm just gonna say it. My pick is Mark Ruffalo. Mark Ruffalo just goes out of his way to humiliate himself and just look like this, horny doofus who thinks that he understands the room and just gets brutally humiliated in this film in the most laughable and and just bizarre way possible. That I feel like for an actor to throw themselves into that role, especially like a role where you have to go from like, being suave to, like performing in a lot of sex scenes to just brutally being humiliated in this film. I think you really got to throw yourself into that role. Especially, there's one like perfect scene in this film where just like he's arguing with Emma Stone and just like they're not quite sure how to end the conversation, and Ruffalo has like pitch perfect timing about watching like all the frustration build on his face, where there's just a moment where you just see him get more and more red with barely saying a word. And it just, it floored me. So yeah, I mean, everyone is so damn good in this category, but if I had to pick, got to pick just one, it's Mark Ruffalo for Poor Things. And now it's time for Best Actress, and the nominations are Annette Bening for Niad, Lily Gladstone for Killers of the Flower Moon, Sandra Hüller for Anatomy of a Fall, Carey Mulligan for Maestro, Emma Stone for Poor Things. And that's it. I don't know why I didn't put another and, but that's, and it seems pretty clear as day here, at least for me, that this category is really going to come down between Lily Gladstone and Emma Stone. And it's mostly because like both their performances are great. Like it's like the characters they play go through such a journey and a transformation where they end up in a much different spot where they are before, and they have an amazing character growth throughout the narrative. And it's very tough call here because like for as much as like my favorite film of last year was Poor Things, as much as I want to pick Emma Stone here because I feel like her performance was incredibly daring for Poor Things, I gotta give it up for Lily Gladstone. Her performance and just like the way that you see her transform throughout this narrative, not to mention a lot of the scenes where like she's like, it feels like she's at death's door. And at one point where she just breaks down in just angry crying and sadness. A lot of like tough scenes that you have to try really hard to sell. Gladstone just knocks it out of the park. So it's like, it's, for as easy as it is, because like a lot of people are going to be saying Lily Gladstone is, the pick for Best Actress, and she probably is going to win the Oscar for this performance. I got to give it up for she nailed that performance. She knocked it out of the park. So yeah, my pick for Best Actress is Lily Gladstone in Killers of the Flower Moon. Now it's time for Best Actor, and the nominations for this category are Bradley Cooper in Maestro, Coleman Domingo in Rustin, Paul Giamatti in The Holdovers, Cillian Murphy in Oppenheimer, and Jeffrey Wright in American Fiction. And I know there's a lot of pull for Cillian Murphy, and I have no doubt in my mind that Murphy is going to win for Best Actor, but personally, for my best pick, and I know a lot of people are going to say it's, it's usually what he usually does in his performances, but Paul Giamatti just really worked for me in The Holdovers. And I think it's just because, Giamatti is cast for what you would expect from him in this role. But still, I think even knowing that, this, curmudgeon-y teacher, that's perfect for Paul Giamatti. But it all depends on whether or not he can deliver it and not just sleepwalk through that role. And for me, at least, like Giamatti just makes that role work so well that I totally got engrossed in the character. Like there was never a moment where I felt like, like Giamatti was just putting on the usual glaze of frustration and like bickering that he usually brings to all his roles of just like, very hot-headed bald guys. And yeah, he makes this film work. And no disrespect, Cillian Murphy, he's great in the film, especially when you consider the transformation that he goes through in that film. Very, very commendable performance, especially for watching like the agony and the anxiety wash over his face as the film continues, and just like there's some close-ups of him that you're never going to be able to get out of your mind. It's a fantastic performance. But Paul Giamatti, just again by a hair here. My pick is Paul Giamatti for The Holdovers for Best Actor. And now we come to... Sorry, I had to clear my throat here for this one. And now we come to the final category, the top award, Best Picture. And the nominations are American Fiction, Anatomy of a Fall, Barbie, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, Poor Things, and The Zone of Interest. Very, very hard choices here, because outside of like Maestro, which I thought was it's a fine biopic, I would honestly be happy with just about any of these films winning. Like, it'd be really, it'd be really like surprising if like the dark horse here of Past Lives, which is barely nominated for much, would win for Best Picture. That would be pretty cool here. But in terms like if you were to ask me which film I felt deserved Best Picture here, I gotta give it to Poor Things. Poor Things was just like, and I know, like, it's my favorite film of last year, and I've kind of chosen it for most of the categories here. But Poor Things just was such an intoxicating film, and it felt like it had such a freedom that I didn't feel as much in the other Best Picture nominations this year. That being said, it was surprising to see a Barbie film get as existential as it did and become, in addition to still becoming like a very fun film for the most part. And Oppenheimer is just wondrous, amazing filmmaking. Probably my favorite Christopher Nolan film, at least in like the past few years, for whatever that may be worth. But yeah, like, I mean, if you had to ask me among all these nominations, I got to go with Poor Things. Poor Things is the film that I had a lot of fun with. I can't stop thinking about. It's gorgeous to look at. I'm fascinated by the performances. I love the world that Yorgos Lanthimos has built here. I love the weird soundtrack. I love all the bizarre camera angles and the circular blurs and distortions that he puts on the cameras. And it's just like a very wildly freeing film that I can't help it. It's my favorite film of last year. So my pick for Best Picture among all of these films is Poor Things. Although it's probably going to go to Oppenheimer. So those are my picks for what I feel are the best films of the Oscar nominations. These aren't my predictions, obviously, but we'll find out what the predictions are when the Academy Awards are held on March 10th. So we'll, So we'll see what happens. Well, we'll see if any of my picks ended up being correct on there. Even though, like, I did make a few predictions during some of my picks, so we'll see. I'm hoping that my picks get chosen. So yeah, here's hoping. All right, we got one comment here. The Lego Movie came out 10 years ago today. Concurrence. Yeah, 2014. Yeah, it's a odd thing to bring up here. I know I have brought up the Lego Movie in terms of like someone complaining about the Oscars not nominating at one point, even though it wasn't eligible the year that they brought it up. So yeah, those are my picks. And yeah, like for anyone who's wondering, no, I am not an Academy Awards voter. Unfortunately, not yet. But I am a voter in the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance, I think it's called, and the online film and television critics awards group. I think, not something like that. The online film and television critics group. I do vote in as well. So, in fact, if you actually go to the Minnesota film critics group, we actually do have our winners listed up there. But the online film and television don't have their awards up yet. They're still counting. They're still counting the nominations. And I have submitted my nomination. It is in there right now. So I'll see if that comes true as well. So be sure to keep a look on the. I do love voting in the online film and television critics group the most, just because like the categories that we have in that one are more interesting, because like we have categories like the best cinematic moment. We have like a Hall of Famer for both like big name actors and lesser known people in the industry. Best trailer, best poster, stuff like that. Always all this fun stuff that I don't get to vote on in other critics groups. So yeah. So yeah. There you go. So we'll see if any of my nominations come true when the Oscars will debut on March 10th. So we'll see. And I'm thinking I might do a stream that night, because like the one thing I like to do is like I don't watch the Academy Awards broadcast, but I do keep track of it on social media throughout the night. So I'm thinking like maybe I'll do a stream where we're just plowing through like we're just keep refreshing the Oscar website and just like reacting to like the winners this year. Although like that being said, I don't think there's going to be any like major upset, like unless something out of the blue like Poor Things when Past Lives wins for Best Picture. I don't think there's going to be any like major surprises this year, because like I said, most of the nominations I'm fine with. There's no Green Book this year. There's no like nomination here I'm going to be like, oh god, why did that win? How did that get nominated? Like, I'm not even like the biggest fan of Maestro, but if Bradley Cooper wins for Best Actor, sure, why not? I might be a little bit miffed if it wins for Best Picture, but I doubt it has that momentum at this point. So yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's fun usually just to track them and just voice your opinion on it. So yeah. Yeah, well, I'll try to do that stream in March. All right, so let's do a little recap of the reviews. We didn't do a lot of reviews, but we'll cover them here. I reviewed Argylle, Matthew Vaughn's latest spy comedy, which is not up to snuff like his Kingsman films. Maybe it's the PG-13 rating. Maybe it's the way that he kept assembling twist after twist, but it just feels like a whole lot of wasted potential. So yeah, big miss there of a spy comedy. That being said, wait, not. I was thinking about reviewing Night Swim, but tell you what, I'll do a mini review after I finish Lisa Frankenstein here. Quick recap of Lisa Frankenstein. Very funny, very horny teen, 1980s teen romantic comedy with a creature feature fused into it. So yeah, if you like horror films and you like teen romance movies, this is definitely going to be your jam, especially because it has a great script by Diablo Cody. It is coming out in theaters this Friday, so be sure to check it out. And here, I'll do this little mini review for you. Little Night Swim. It's not a very good horror film. It's about a killer pool. Mostly didn't work for me. The acting was kind of atrocious here and there. Felt like wasted potential, but the most positive praise I'll say about the film. Night Swim takes place in Minnesota during the summer, and it portrays summer as actually feeling like a sunny summer day instead of like a dreary, snow's gonna fall soon, it's Minnesota. And I'm only saying that just because the other film, the most recent film I remember being set in Minnesota was Five Nights at Freddy's, which made it just look depressing, even though it didn't look like there was snow on the ground. So thank you, Night Swim. I might not have enjoyed you as a film, but I appreciate your depiction of Minnesota. That wasn't terrible. So yeah, in addition to later doing a stream on the Oscars when they come up, we've got more films to review in February that are coming up. What do we got? Well, I'm going to be reviewing Madam Web. That'll be coming up. There was another one I forgot. What is it called? It was it's a heist film. It'll come to me later. But in addition to that, in the next few weeks, I will also be reviewing Dune 2 from Denis Villeneuve, which I'm very much looking forward to. So you can look forward to, in the future, about 2 weeks from now, reviews of Madam Web and Dune 2, in addition to whatever other films I could find in between there. So, if you like more early reviews like Lisa Frankenstein, and I will probably review Dune before it comes out. Like, I'm trying to sync it up with, like, when the embargo drops. Be sure to stay tuned to this channel. Subscribe for more updates on the latest reviews and when I do these live streams to get the latest on films. And be sure to check out my writings over at movieswithmark.com, filminquiry.com, and twincitiesgeek.com. In particular, over at movieswithmark.com and filminquiry.com, you can see my review of Argylle. And on movieswithmark.com, I will have the review of Lisa Frankenstein up later this week. So, until then, yeah, let's hope that my picks came true for the Oscars. Be sure to leave a comment if you have a particular winner that you're hoping for at the Academy Awards. And I will check back with you in about 2 to 3 weeks to cover more of the latest films. So until then, have a Megazone time. Wait, was that the film? That's not Megazone. Megaforce. Megazone's an anime. Alright, good night, everybody.